All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here. We're doing our 2025 preview and prediction for the Texas A&M Aggies. Looking at this coaching staff, Mike Elko, second year in Aggie land, 24-14 record in his 3 years as a head coach, including his time at Duke. Colin Klein, Holloman Wiggins will be sharing the offensive coordinator duties, and then second season in the role of defensive coordinator for Jay Bateman. Really good offseason for the Aggies, top 15 in high school and portal cycles. 8-5, and they ended up losing in the Las Vegas Bowl, so a respectable result, but certainly not what the Aggies want to continue to see. Looking at this offense to get things started, this is a group that a lot of people thought Connor Wigman was going to be the main guy. We weren't really all that sure about him, Nick, and it turns out the Aggies are quite sure that he's not going to be the guy of the future. So he's transferred out to, I believe it's Houston. The only game he really looked good in was the one against Missouri. Other than that, he was really poor, which led to a change in Marcel Reed. I think the real story was he got hurt, and then Reed stepped in, and they didn't turn back after that. This is a player that was respectable. You know, he's a standout runner. A guy with smooth hips at 6'2", 180. Makes good moves at the second level. He's a good touch thrower. Seems to have a great understanding of how much velocity and what angle to use on certain throws. Of course, he has great mobility in the pocket. He can really evade well. Really needs to develop his ability to read the field, though. Usually takes off or panics if the first read's not available. Inconsistent accuracy, and of course, he's a bit undersized for the position. This is a guy that had good production last year, Nick. 15 passing touchdowns, 7 rushing, 6 picks. I'm still iffy, though, to call him the future of the program. I think, there's not many guys breathing down his neck. Jacob Zeno's in this room. This is going to be the Marcel Reed show. What's the ceiling for him, though? I don't think it's all that high at this moment. But, of course, we're going to give him some time to see if he can develop in those key areas.
I am certainly still iffy on the Marcel Reed show. I think he brings a lot of comparisons to Jalen Milroe. Obviously, the size is not a very valid comparison, but the way that the both of them were, early on in Milroe's career, and you saw it still in later part of his career where his first read wasn't open, he would just bolt for the exits and try to find a way to make a play happen. And that works sometimes, but other times that leads to fumbles or bad mistakes. And you could really see that being an issue. I think, Reed's a solid runner, right? You saw he had some productive moments last year, had a lot of attempts at 116 attempts on the ground, but had 543 yards rushing, 4.7 yards for those attempts, and 7 scores, about 50 yards per game. But that's a lot of attempts there, right? He ran the ball a lot last year, a lot of panic moves from him going out there trying to make something happen when it wasn't available. He was an accurate at times passer and was, looked reliable in some of these games. 61% comp rate, 1,800 yards passing, 15 touchdowns, and 6 picks. Has a lot of room to grow. I think there's a high ceiling sort of opportunity here for him, but there's also high potential that does not work out for A&M. This is a raw prospect that needs a lot of work, and I don't know if I trust Colin Klein and Holloman Wiggins to kind of mold a prospect in that regard here. I think the pass game is certainly a weakness for this A&M offense. I think Reed is an interesting dual threat, but a lot that has to be shown from him to me to believe in this A&M team right now. I think you're taking a massive gamble with him under center, regardless of how much experience he has. It's a big roll of the dice here. It certainly could boom, but it could certainly bust for the A&M Aggies.
Yeah, I'd say you're probably being a little bit too negative there, because this is a guy that I think can be a great game changer throwing as a runner and, of course, as a thrower. What he did against Florida, I thought, coming in relief was pretty impressive, and he did that from time to time. Of course, like you said, that there are some things to worry about. I think Colin Klein, he can do well for dual threat quarterback. When he was a dual threat when he was back at Kansas State. So I think he can certainly mold him some of his weaknesses, improve his technique in all regards. And if this passing he wants to improve, the weapons are going to have to be better. I thought they had a pretty good group last year, but it never really came to fruition. They go out and grab Casey Concepcion, a guy from NC State who has high-end football IQ, great yards after catch abilities, showcases great twitch. Didn't play as hard this past season. They really struggled to get great separation. Also had 7 drops, has 12 so far through 2 years. He can be used out of the backfield. Gets nearly all of his work out of the slot at 5'11", 187. We knew he would transfer at some point. The Aggies ended up paying top dollar to get him. Picked up Mario Craver from Mississippi State. He was a big play weapon downfield for them. Spent most of his time out wide at 5'10", 170. Terry Bussey, of course, this is a Swiss Army athlete, a 5-star entering his second year. Had some impressive moments, but I would like to see greater production this year, of course. Jonah Wilson comes over from Houston, brings some much-needed size at 6'2", 200, but limited experience. Ashton Bethel-Roman, a long strider, a great short area quickness. Isaiah Williams was a top 250 ranked 4-star recruit entering his second year in the program. They also have an incoming 5-star in Jerome Miles, who has great explosiveness, and he can be a vertical playmaker. I think it's a solid wide receiver group here, some really good upside in terms of what they have in talent. For a couple years now, Nick, and I know this has been the case with the entire roster, they've just not seemed to really develop these wide receivers. I know it's a new crew that's in town, so we're certainly going to give them time. Lots of turnover at tight end, of course. They pick up Amari Nyblack, who's doing nothing in his career. Nate Borkirker spent 4 years at Nebraska, and he's going to be a block-heavy role. Same with Auburn import Mike O'Reilly, who's 5'6", 266. So I don't expect the tight end position to be all that great. I think they have some really talented pass catchers here, Nick. I love the trio that they have, but they don't have a lot of size to speak of. And these guys got to be able to run good routes for this quarterback.
Certainly a very undersized unit at wide receiver here. I think they added two key pieces in Craver and Concepcion out of the portal. Two guys that were popular names that entered the portal. Concepcion had, a down season at NC State, right? It just wasn't a great season for him. He was a little banged up, just not playing phenomenal football in the slot. 460 for him, 6 touchdowns for him last season. Did have 2 rushing touchdowns as well. The year before that, he had 800 yards receiving and 10 scores. So you can see that in flashes there. A really good slot asset. They're going to plug him in there. He'll be really solid. Mario Craver is a player that I was intrigued to see where he ended up out of the portal. He looked really good in limited reps for Mississippi State last year. Stood out on a bad offense for that team. About 350 yards receiving, 21.6 yards per grab, and 3 scores for him. He's a product from Birmingham, Alabama, that I think could be really solid in this offense. They add Amari Niblack, who's just done nothing at Alabama and Texas. A bit of an interesting move there, a guy who I just don't really believe can do a whole lot at tight end. They also have Theo Mellon returning at tight end, who is a solid tight end. He had about 180 yards receiving last year and 2 scores on limited grabs. Terry Bussey was solid for this team last year, 216 yards receiving for him. Was also got a couple yards, in terms of using him as a gadget player. He had 2 rushing touchdowns last year, so they can use him in a variety of different ways here. It's a young unit that's bringing in 2 new faces, 2 younger guys that have some solid reps at their previous schools, but overall pretty young unit, inexperienced unit that's hoping to find a way to step up here and really help out their young quarterback.
The best strength for this offense is the run game. Le'Veon Moss coming off a tough injury late in the year. The impressive acceleration, a pretty decisive runner, like his vision. Good cutting abilities. He can lower his pads and leave a nice boom. 6', 210. Ruben Owens comes back after his injury before last year. Played, I think it was the bowl game. Athletic frame, quick-footed runner, good open field speed, great stop-start ability. Covers good ground on his moves. They also have Amari Daniels, had some nice production last fall, and great ball security. He's a bigger frame guy, did struggle to have consistent, efficient performances, and they also have E.J. Smith, who's still on roster, but he was barely used last fall. Quality player if needed. Great room here, if fully healthy. I know that's the biggest question mark. What's Moss's, status going to be? I'm not sure. I would like to think come conference play, though, he'll be at 100%. 195 yards per game for this group, Nick. I think they can really take that next level. That's the biggest, part about having Reed with his legs being such a great asset is you're throwing a deep backfield. And, of course, we'll talk about the offensive line. It's full of size. And this could be a very daunting run game. But against South Carolina and Texas, 2 elite D lines, they did pretty much nothing, and they got clobbered in those games.
I absolutely love this rushing attack last year, 26 in the nation, about 195 yards per game on the ground. A really good unit that goes 4 deep here with really solid players. Le'Veon Moss, he can play up to his full health and full potential this year that we saw a lot last year from him. He could be a really star back for this team. 765, 6.3 yards per attempt, 10 scores, and about 85 yards per game in his 9 games last year. Really good numbers there. Amari Daniels was solid for this team as well, 661, 4.8 yards per carry, and 8 scores for him. He's a very versatile back. Ruben Owens has a lot of high potential there. You saw it in the bowl game against USC. He looked good in that matchup. He played limited, last year, obviously because of the injury, but still a player that you have high hopes for returning back. E.J. Smith further down the depth chart, but still a back that can get involved. He had 200 yards rushing last year, about 4 yards per carry. He'll be involved in some sort of way. This is a unit that's really good, right? They can run the ball a lot. Adding Reed into that mix full-time will certainly continue to help this rushing attack. This is a phenomenal rushing attack, one of the best in the conference, if not the nation. A really, really deep running back room that will certainly have to carry the bulk of the load this year in College Station.
Now we look at that offensive line. The entire starting 5 is back. They were 53rd allowed in sacks, 10th allowed in terms of fewest tackles for loss. So this was a very sound unit for them last year. Left tackle Trey Zunn at 6'7", 315 has really emerged in one of the nation's best pass blockers. Chase Masantis played significantly better following his move from right tackle to left guard at 6'6", 320. Seems like the interior definitely suited him much better. At center, Kalina Faiu was a really good player towards the back half of the year, but he was better during the middle part of the season. 2 solid options at right tackle. Demetrius Crownover played really good towards the end of the year as well at 6'7", 330. And then Ruben Fathery, a veteran of the program, has been pretty solid his entire career for the Aggies at 320 pounds. Great group here, elite size, good experience, and that doesn't go without mentioning right guard Armaj Reed Adams. Nick, this guy was very, very good. Showcased great power, a very impressive run blocker. 6'5", 330. He does play way too high in pass pro, can cause poor balance or an overshoot in pass protection. He was used as an athletic polar / lead blocker often, though. They also picked up a 5-star Lamont Rogers, Blake Ivy. He was a top 100 prospect in last year's class. So great offensive line here, Nick. And one thing that, is obviously common, it's been like this for many years, is they are absolutely loaded with size. Development up front has not been ideal. That was a big problem under Jimbo Fisher. They just could not get these guys in sync. I think this is a group that's going to be one of the nation's best. I picked them as the best in the conference. I know that's also some wishful thinking. I think this is a great part of this offense. That's why they're able to run the ball so well. I know against tougher opponents they didn't exactly show out, but I think with one more year of experience for everybody, they're really going to boom.
A phenomenal offensive line here. One of the best in the conference. I certainly think they're up there, if not the best, like you alluded to here. Trey Zune's phenomenal at left tackle. I love watching him play. He's a good veteran player who knows what he's doing. Demetrius Cronover is a really good asset at right tackle. I trust both tackles here, right? These are phenomenal tackles. The interior, maybe you get a little concerned about Reed Adams. I think he's still a really solid player. The left side I really like as well here as well. They have some solid depth across the board for this team. I trust this offensive line group a lot. This is a phenomenal unit that's really deep, has a lot of key pieces, a key part of this offense. They can play up to their full strengths. They should open a lot of pathways for this rushing attack that should be firing on all cylinders.
Looking at the verdict for the Aggies offense, they have a good unit in place here of a stout run game and a great offensive line loaded with size. What is the realistic growth rate for this passing attack? Those ultimately going to dictate their upside, which at the moment seems capped. Just quarterbacks like him, Nick, with the skill set of Reed, being only 6'2", 180, he just doesn't scream a guy that's going to pick you apart from the pocket. What did we see against Texas? Pocket collapses because no one's available downfield, and he's not more than a one-read thrower. He looks to step up because of that collapsing pocket, and guess what? There's a spy right in his face. They couldn't do anything that day, Nick, and I think that's going to be a common theme if they can't figure things out downfield. Reed must develop, or that's going to be pretty crucial against those tougher defenses. I think against the mid-level part of the conference, they're going to run all over most opponents. But if they want to compete for the SEC, they got to take that next step through the air.
They should be able to run all over the weaker opponents on their schedule, but they'll struggle against some of those vaunted defensive lines that they'll face later in conference play, some of those stronger units in the conference. I think Reed's a great player who has a lot of high upside potential. I think he can certainly meet that potential, but I'm bullish on him right now. I worry about his liabilities as a passer. I worry about his ability to make multiple reads in a game, and I think teams are going to be able to crack his running ability and his legs, and they'll be able to spy him and make him uncomfortable. Certainly those tougher teams on the schedule, like your Texas and your other bigger teams in the conference. South Carolina is another one that I'm highlighting with a very good defense. That's a matchup for later in this season. I like what this rushing game can do across the board, right? I think Ruben Owens is a phenomenal back. I think the rest of them, Daniels, the rest of that backfield is really strong. Le'Veon Moss is a phenomenal running back for this team. I love the offensive line. I worry about the wide receiving core because a bunch of guys who are plugging in from different schools that have never played together, have some inexperience, some younger guys. I'm a little bit concerned about those pass catches of a younger quarterback. I think that's just a very dangerous mix in a high-level conference like the SEC. Curious to see how this offense plays this year. I want to see what type of step forward they can take if they can make that step forward.
Now look at the defensive side of the ball for the Aggies. This is a group that returns 7 starters. They lose 3 crucial NFL draftees on the defensive line, though. The edge department, of course, loses 2 stars. TJ Searcy arrives from Florida, though. He was a quality run defender, only 4 sacks from his 2 years, though. Deion Hayes arrives from Colorado, who's been a quite respectable player in both areas. Enters his 6th year of college football, though. The real future star here is going to be Cassius Howell. He should mold into a superstar for them. He was elite at Bowling Green a couple years back, impressed in a backup role last fall. He even had 7 pass breakups. Depth's going to be tested, I believe. Ryland Kennedy played last year, wasn't all that great. Solomon Williams, a top 154 star, enters his 2nd year. Picked up Sam Pemba from Georgia, who didn't play in 2 years for the Dogs. Looking at the interior, they return a big-time veteran in Albert Regas, 6'2", 310. He's a great run stopper. I love the addition of Tyler Diem from Iowa State. He was a nice, versatile player at 295. Been very stout against the run as well. Former 5-star DJ Hicks, 6'5", 300, has yet to live up to his billing, but of course he still has the upside, I would imagine. And then Dalen Evans, a high-ranked 4-star, should see more time in the rotation this fall. Landed a few high-ranked recruits to anchor down the interior. I think the defensive line will be just fine, but trying to get the same type of forcefulness they had last year, Nick, with all that elite talent, is certainly going to be hard. I think Howell's going to play like a first-team all-conference guy, and I like what they have on the interior, but it isn't going to be enough to compete.
Expecting big things from Cassius Howell, who's your big leader on this defensive line. A phenomenal asset, a guy who's a great athlete across the board, really good coming off that right side. Had a solid season last year, 40 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 4 sacks for him, 7 pass breakups on the line. He gets his hand up and blocks passes. Albert Regis does the same. He had 36 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 6 pass breakups as well. He was really solid. DJ Hicks, showed some potential, but still has to find a way to get to that 5-star billing. 17 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, and 2 pass breakups for him. I think the adds of the portal were solid. CRC showed a lot last year in his limited appearances at Florida, had 34 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and a QB hurry. He also had 3.5 tackles for loss in 2023. TJ Searcy could be really solid for this team. I think they added, Deion Hayes from Colorado, who's not a bad add. He had a really good 2023 campaign with 10.5 sacks, 10.5 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks plus 6 QB hurries. Saw his production dip in 2024, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and QB hurry. For him, he's still a very talented player that's been around college football for a little bit. They also added a solid asset out of Iowa State, and Tyler Odenyami, who was really solid for them last year. 33 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 4 QB hurries. He had 9 of those in 2023. He's a solid asset that they bring in the interior. A big physical guy there with DJ Hicks not too far behind him. This is a good defensive line. It's got nice depth here. They added some key pieces out of the portal. They brought in some high-level 5-star or high-level recruits out of high school, 4- and 5-star level players as well. So this is a really solid unit. They can really perform well here and be strong against the run.
Elko does a great job, of course, of getting these guys in sync. He's seen it at Duke, where he really maximizes their talent and their skill. So I think he's going to do a good job putting these guys in the right position to succeed. Look at the middle of this defense. Teron York, he's been a phenomenal player. He's barely missed tackles across his first 2 seasons. Was a pretty easy targeting coverage, though, but he's been a perennial leader for this defense. He's going to be one of the nation's top backers, Nick. Not in the SEC, the entire nation. He's just been that good for him. Scooby Williams really impressed in his run defense improvements, which really shocked me because he was pretty poor up until last year. Still struggled to be a consistent tackler, but he did show good promise. So I think that's a phenomenal 1-2 punch in the middle. Damian Sanford was below average, but he gained good reps in his second year for the Aggies. X3-star Jordan Lockhart from St. John Bosco is going to be a backup as well. I think this is a solid group here. Really like the starters. If Williams can continue to improve his game, Nick, this is going to be one of the more daunting linebacking duos in the country.
Very strong linebacking core here. York's a phenomenal player. Had 82 total tackles last year, 10 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 4 pass breakups, and a pick. He was the top tackler on the team last year. Always love bringing back your top tackler. I just think he should get at least 100 tackles this year. He'll certainly be productive. I worry about him in coverage. Certainly, I want to see if his coverage asset can improve a little bit this year. Keep an eye on how he performs in coverage. Scooby Williams was really solid in coverage. Was also good against the run last year, which was unexpected from him. 43 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, a pick, and 4 pass breakups. Good numbers there. I think they had a little bit depth down the depth chart. Damian Sanford was solid for this team. 33 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss for him last year. In rotational reps, they move him around a little bit. They get a lot out of him. He's a solid asset. Jordan Lockhart's a younger player that could potentially be involved in this linebacking core as well. Probably the best part of this defense, a really strong physical linebacking core that's got some great leaders and some great players.
Now you look at the secondary for the Aggies. Get back 2 good players at corner, or in terms of experience. The corner group really wasn't all that good. Dees Ricks struggled in coverage. He was inconsistent when defending double moves. Will Lee, though, has been quite sound in his career. Was better in coverage than Ricks, but he did struggle late in the year. Both were incredibly poor tacklers. Picked up Julian Humphrey from Georgia, who never really impressed me for the Bulldogs, then quit right before the SEC title game. So do with that what you want. Javon Thomas returns after playing the 3rd most snaps at corner. He was an average player for them. Aggies do lose their top cornerback slot, BJ Mays. Jordan Shaw, though, is going to fill that gap with ease. He's been impressive in his 2 years. Indiana and Washington comes over from, of course, the Huskies to fill that spot. Tyreek Chappell's role remains unclear. He was a good outside corner for a couple of years, made the transition to slot, but he ended up getting hurt in week 2. So his role is pretty undefined right now, but he's going to carve something out in the secondary as a veteran. Safety groups led by Dalton Brooks. This guy shows a quick trigger downhill, a nice hard hitter, good range when playing a deep half. I think this is a very good player there. Bryce Anderson really hasn't been that great, but he's a veteran that's been solid in coverage. Might get pushed by last year's 4-star add in Miles Davis. And then you have Marcus Ratcliffe, who was a pretty stout run defender, had a team-high 15 missed tackles, that is. The safeties all seem to really struggle in that tackling area, and I already told you the corners were bad in that area too, Nick. Good secondary here with depth and talent, collectively need to play better, and I think they will in Elko's second year. That's something we predicted in his second year at Duke, Nick, because that secondary would ascend to one of the nation's best, and what do you know, they were. I think there's enough here for them to be very stout, but these corners need to be more consistent, specifically Dees Ricks.
The tackling was certainly an issue for the secondary last year, and I think some of these guys have improved some of that, hopefully. But this is a decent unit overall. Dalton Brooks was solid for this team, 59 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, a sack, a pick, and 2 pass breakups for him. Marcus Ratcliffe, he missed a lot of tackles, but he was still solid at times for this team. 48 total tackles for him, 4 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions, not bad. Will Lee was good enough at times for this team. A team-high 10 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, including one of them he took to the house, 42 total tackles for him. Further down the depth chart, Bryce Anderson showed some strengths at times, as did Des Rick, 24 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a pick for Anderson. Ricks also had 20 total tackles, an interception, and a tackle for loss for him. Tyreek Chappell, I like him a lot. I thought he was really good for this team in 2023. Had 7 pass breakups, was solid, but got hurt last year. Hoping he can play back to his full strengths. I think they added a solid piece in Jordan Shaw, who was good last year in his stop at Washington. 37 total tackles for him, 4 tackles for loss last year, 6 pass breakups. He's a solid player that they brought out of the portal. I think he can really do a lot for your defense. Overall, this is a secondary that I like. I think there's a high upside here. They certainly have to improve the tackling, and I am concerned about the missed tackles last year. But I think it's a good unit in coverage. They got a couple of interceptions here and there, a serious amount of interceptions. Certainly earlier in the season, Ratcliffe had 3 of his own. Will Lee had 2, so they're returning that sort of production here. I like what the secondary can do.
I was really impressed with this unit, despite being 90th in passing yards per game allowed, though, because they were 4th nationally in 53.3% opponent completion rating. The LSU game, they were getting carved up in that one, allowed some big plays, but they bounced back in the second half, and they played really hard. I thought you saw that periodically throughout the year. They didn't get burned against Texas. They were playing good for the most part against USC. I know that didn't work out for them in the end. But this was a battle-tested secondary, Nick. They never seemed to get bummed out, and they played hard, so I was pretty impressed with them. Defensive verdict, the Aggies lose some top talent up front, but should remain stout in the trenches, and I think the middle of the defense and its secondary is going to make big strides. Should be quite strong defense in 2025. They'll need to show better run-stopping and playmaking from their corners. Probably the safeties, too, since they missed so many tackles. I went with a B, and I can't exactly remember why. I probably want to go ahead and bump that up to maybe a B+, though, Nick, because I do have a lot of hype and praise, and, of course, the coaching staff is great. So I'm probably going to go with a B+. What do you make of this unit here?
Yeah, I think a B plus is kind of right where this is. I might be leaning closer to B, but you could get a B plus out of me here. This is a unit that I like what they can do against the run this year. I think this is a solid defensive line. The linebacking core is one of the best in the nation. I like the secondary as well. You got great coaching here. You're always going to rely and trust your A&M defense. They'll probably win a couple of games by some low scores here. I just don't know if they have the depth in the secondary to ultimately overcome all of that. When push comes to shove, if injuries sort of happen here, and the tackling was a bit of a concern in the secondary. I like the defensive line, love the linebacking core. The secondary I think is a really solid unit as well. A good defense for the SEC, in my opinion.
Looking at the schedule and the prediction, the Aggies defense can certainly contend in the SEC, and I really like what the run game has in store this season with a veteran offensive line and a great backfield along with a dual-threat quarterback. But in this conference, your ground game will go cold at times. This passing attack will need to prove it's capable of bailing them out in those situations. Will be a tough team to beat, I think, on every single weekly basis. I just don't think they're going to contend for a title, though. I think the defense will be good, but they won't be perfect by any means. And I think that passing attack's probably not going to reach the potential we would hope for. I have them at 8-4, though, and that includes wins over Auburn, Florida, and South Carolina, and even Arkansas. Those are all games I think they can lose, Nick, just because it feels like they can't take that next step. I don't think they're going to have enough essence on offense to just blow people out. And we've just seen them struggle continuously over the last couple of years. And I have a lot of faith in this new staff. I think Elko is a home run hire. 8-4 for me. I know you're going with 7-5. And, the game at Missouri, I think, is a trap game for them that they're going to lose. I think it's going to be another one of those seasons where you see a little bit of good and a little bit of bad with wins over tougher teams and the losses against, like a Missouri, maybe even an Arkansas where they slip up. Great opportunity early in the year, Nick, against Notre Dame. They're going to be trying to figure out a lot of new things with, breaking in a new quarterback and whatnot. Don't think they win that game, though, but if they do, great opportunity for them to go on a bit of a run in the first half of the season.
This might be a harsh 7-5 for me, but I think the schedule is certainly tough. A lot of tough road trips here. I have them losing to Florida and South Carolina. I think they do beat Missouri. Those are the games that I'm flipping from you. Very intriguing. They're playing Notre Dame on September 13th. I think that's a really fun home-and-home that's being finished from last year, but I just don't see them beating the national champion runner-ups up in South Bend. They'll play really good football up there. They're tough to beat at home. I know NIU beat them at home, but still, most of the time, they're tough to beat at home other than that one-off. But I trust the Notre Dame offense to really figure it out by the time we get to week 3. I think it's going to be a tough game for A&M, although I am intrigued to watch how that goes. Maybe a defensive battle here. I think Florida gets the best of them in Aggie land. I think Florida's just a really good team. They'll be able to kind of figure it out, although that is a tough environment to play in. At LSU is never easy. At Texas is never easy in a rivalry game. And South Carolina, I think that South Carolina team will find a way to win that game. And I talked about that in the South Carolina episode if you want some more in-depth reasoning on why I mentioned that South Carolina could beat A&M this year. This is a team that I think is good, right? I do like the coaching here. I like the defense, but I just worry about the offense. I think the offense has a lot of concerns for me. I think they'll just find a way to put themselves in a tough situation. Some turnovers will certainly haunt this offense this year, and I don't know if I trust the passing game fully at all. A tough schedule as well. When you come to look at those road games, right, at LSU, at Notre Dame, at Texas, are certainly not easy. This is a tough spot to be in, right? I think 7-5 is a little bit harsh here. I think this team could win 8, 9, 10 games on paper, and they certainly have an opportunity to do so. I just don't think I want to put my chips in that basket. I don't really know if I trust this offense to get the job done when push comes to shove. So I'm going to go conservative, go 7-5 here, but I could certainly see myself being wrong on this one.
Yeah, that game against Notre Dame is going to be a night game in South Bend. And one thing I want to point out, Nick, is I have those 3 crucial victories coming at home. And against Texas, you remember that home environment. I remember me and my friend pregame were watching it, and it was just silence. Not just in the living room watching the game, but on the commentary too. We were sitting back going, "This is utterly insane." I don't know if it's gonna be rocking like it was against Texas, but that's the type of environment they have with the 12th man.
It certainly is an incredible environment. I caught a game there at one point when I was in college. I saw Alabama play Texas A&M, a game that Alabama lost to the Aggies. The stadium was rocking all night. When they have a prime time game against a top opponent, that stadium is impossible to deal with if you're an away team. And Texas was in a very tough, vaunting environment. Can they replicate that week in, week out against your weaker opponents like South Carolina and Florida? That's something you have to keep an eye on. Some of those games that are earlier in the day, the environment is not as tough. It's certainly something you have to factor in, though. The stadium is no joke. Kyle Field is certainly no joke, and the 12th man definitely put their full effort on behind it. So if they run the table at home and win every single home game this year, that would not surprise me at all.
That's gonna be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.